They don't want someone that's unreliable, if they don't want someone that's lazy, if they don't want someone that can't think, they want someone that is reliable, they want someone that can think for themselves, and they want someone that's prepared to put in the work. But one thing that I found really interesting about the podcast between those two is they were celebrating how many times they failed. And it was just over and over, and they were talking about how many failures they had. And it's because I realized that not everybody's going to like me, not everybody's going to like what I say, but the only thing that I can consistently do.
Alrighty. So, yeah, it's interesting. We were just talking about starting the podcast as if you were in the middle of an action scene, because it's always
Mm,
better. I personally prefer it, just keeping it very human, casual, and like that's what I enjoy from I don't know, like Joe Rogan, all these guys. They're just sitting, being real people, talking about real stuff. There's nothing orchestrated, right? So here we are. It's good to see you,
mm.
James. How are you?
I'm good to see you as well. But if you compare the intros as well, so Joe Rogan goes straight into it. Your what's his name, Stephen Bartlett, with his Diary of a CEO, he does a little bit of an intro. Chris Williamson, all of those guys, I think they're leaning a little bit more towards the just jumping into it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
On that topic, who are your what are your favorite podcasts, or who are you listening to at the moment?
Mm. So there's a guy called Chris Do, the future. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
The FUTUR.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have been consuming his content at a rapid rate now
Mm.
for quite a few months. But the majority of what I watch at the moment,
Mhm.
outside of him, I mean, I listen to some Joe Rogan podcasts because of the guests, the kind of people he has on there. And I actually
Yeah.
listened to a really interesting one last week of his. I mean, everyone knows who Adam Sandler is, and some people like him, some people don't like him. But
Yeah.
one thing that I found really interesting about the podcast between those two is they were celebrating how many times they failed. They were
Mm.
they were talking about times that they've tried to do stand-up comedy at a club, and what was the expression? They just eat it. Yeah, ate it at that place. I bombed at that place. And it
Yeah.
was just over and over, and they were talking about how many failures they had. And it was good to listen to because you realize that guys at that level they've messed up so many times. So many times.
Yeah. 100%. And it's the more you fail, the more chances you have to succeed, right?
Mm,
Versus never trying and never giving yourself the opportunity to learn, right?
mm,
So, well,
mm,
anyways, I mean, I want to acknowledge you first because you're always putting out there very good content, and also with your newsletter and your courses now. And I've noticed that you're always showing up with a very grounded energy. And there are two words that come to mind when I see you speaking. One is Stoic, the Stoic philosophy.
mm.
And the other word is articulate. I feel that you're always very clear and eloquent. What are your thoughts on that? Would you agree with that, or am I off the mark?
No, you're pretty close. You're pretty so with regards to stoic, and I suppose you could nearly say calm. That was not always the case. And when I was a lot younger, I was chatty and I would talk way, way too much. I did not have an economy of words. And over the years, so Michael Dunleavy was actually a big contributor to that because I mean, a lot of people know it at this point. He actually hired me for my first sales job 12 years ago now. And he used to used to say this thing, and he'd ask me a question and I would start talking,
Mhm.
and he would just cut me off and he'd say, headlines, James.
Mm,
Headlines. What are the headlines?
yeah.
And that started that journey of an economy of words. And then I
Mm,
think it was really starting to study the best speakers in the world.
mm,
Everything that they did was calculated. They didn't say words that didn't need to be there.
yes.
And I think a big part of it was finding a version of myself that I was comfortable with, because I think I used to talk a lot to make up for insecurities or
Mm,
um, perhaps image or status problems or anything like that, which all young men go through. And I
Yeah.
think it was really dialing in who I am, what I stand for, and being comfortable with where I sit in the world, regardless of other people's opinions. I
Mm.
think that really helped me center myself because
Yeah.
I realized that not everybody's going to like me. Not everybody's going to like what I say. But the only thing that I can consistently do is be 100% authentically myself.
Yeah.
And as for the articulate side of things,
Mhm.
my mum is an English teacher.
Okay.
And yeah, growing up, I had no choice but to be well spoken, and spelling and grammar and everything had to be correct, and not in a bad way. Very loving mother, and it was never militant. This is the way it must be.
Yeah.
But mum went out of her way to make sure that I used the right words, and I spelling and grammar and everything was correct.
Mm.
And that's done me very well over the years. Very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell. Now, practically, have you trained that? Like, for instance, since you started realizing the headlines and the economy of word and working with Michael, have you
Mm.
consciously trained that, or is it something that has kind of come naturally to you as you've kind of shifted that
It didn't
awareness?
come naturally. It didn't. A big a big help for that was listening back to my calls,
Mhm.
listening to
Yeah.
conversations that I've had, even podcasts that I have been on in the past.
Mm.
And you listen back and realize I could have said that whole rant in 10 to 15 words and been more concise.
Yeah.
And a big part of it was the more that I listened to, when you hear people go out on a tangent, when you hear them just talk, 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 talk,
Mhm.
a lot of the time I found myself thinking, get to the point, get to the point. What, come on, you have to be able to explain this better.
Mm.
And then there's that reflection of, well, what version do I present to the world?
Mm.
Am I the kind of person that has an economy of words? Am I the kind of person that can dial things in? And then you have those contrasts, those
Yeah.
things next to each other, and you realize, no, actually, I don't. And sales calls as well, I found that I would say the same thing three different ways.
Yeah.
There's no need for that. How do I be more concise? And I
Mhm.
actively worked on it.
Yeah. How specifically? So listening to your calls and just making it more concise, or how specifically?
Mm. It's really easy what you notice someone else doing that other people notice you doing. And an example that always comes to mind. So if you're, say, learning Muay Thai, for example,
Mhm.
my coach can say to me so many times, when you step in for a kick, you step out with your foot. You don't pigeon toe, you don't come in because then you have to roll over it. And he would tell me so many times. I kept getting it wrong because I didn't understand it. But
Mhm.
when I hold pads for someone else, someone that's newer, I'll see them do it straight away and say, hey, don't point your toe in like that. Otherwise, you have to rock. Ha, now I know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And you see that in someone else. It's
Yeah.
the same with sales calls. So if I listen to someone else's sales call and I'm thinking, you could really be quiet right now, you don't have to talk that much. It's a little bit of a reminder to myself of, huh, you could talk a lot less on sales calls as well.
Yeah.
So it was by listening back to other people's sales calls, listening back to people's role plays, listening back to my own sales calls as well.
Yeah.
And you just start to pick that up over time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. It's interesting because English is not my first language, and so I've always been very self-conscious of the words I use. And even when I was a kid, like learning Spanish, maybe I wasn't that smart, but I remember finding it difficult to find the words. Like in my
Mm,
mind as a kid, how how do the words work? Like, what's the correct grammar? What's coming next? How should I put the words together? And so in English, it's a bit more amplified because, well, now I've been speaking English for many, many years, and I speak English all the time. I'm married to an English person, in fact. Although I was thinking the other day, I still dream in Spanish. So subconsciously, it's still there. But recently, I started taking some acting lessons with
Mm,
an old friend from school who's a very good actor. And some of the homework he gave to me was simply, well, yeah, studying like speeches, studying my own sales calls, and recording very short and simple scripts that have nothing to do with sales
mm,
to really find that eloquence, that clarity, that brevity. And he gave me a very interesting homework, which was to simply explain in a couple of minutes how does a cake become a cake, like after you put it in the oven. And
mm,
so we did that, but in different styles and perspectives. So yeah, like I don't know, Robert De Niro, and then like some other weird character, or like comic or tragic, or and so impro and theater acting exercises, but it's helped a ton, and it's also very
mm.
fun. So I was just wondering if you had other insights on how to become more articulate, but that
That's
makes
so
sense.
interesting. How a
Yeah,
cake becomes a cake.
yeah.
Yeah. So you had to do an imitation of Robert De Niro. Is that
Well, I did a short video about explaining what happens to the cake for it to become a cake. What's the process and what happens to it before and after it goes in the oven. So just 2 minutes. Hey, this is the the cake process. This is how I become a cake. And you can play around with it. You can say it in third person. You can say it in first person as a cake, etc. It's just like a fun impro exercise. But then there's this scene with Robert De Niro. I don't know if you remember that film. It's called Analyze Me or Analyze This with Billy Crystal, where Robert De Niro is like this old thug. He's like an old like mob guy in New York, and he's trying to build a new life. He's trying to leave his past behind, and so he goes to the shrink, who's Billy
mm,
Crystal, and
mm,
and he gets a job as a car sales guy. And there's this really funny scene where he's showing the car to some a couple who just came in the showroom, and it's hilarious. You gotta look it up on YouTube.
analyze this? All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Analyze this, Robert De Niro, car sales guy. It's the best think about it objection handling in history. I mean, I won't
Analyze that.
analyze that. I won't do it justice, of course, but
Mob boss as a car
basically,
salesman. Okay.
yeah,
I'll watch that after
yeah, yeah.
this.
I'm not gonna spoil it for you,
Yeah.
but it's helped me a lot just finding different ways to, yeah, articulate, move my mouth, find my voice, different ranges, different colors, different cadences, different rhythms, and and it's helped a ton just presenting myself even on
Mm,
Zoom, because you mentioned, hey, I really like that backdrop, and everything is part of the scene, right?
mm,
In your
mm.
case, all the minimal vibe, right? It
Yeah.
transmits something, it communicates even without you saying anything.
Yeah. I there's going to be something else that'll go up behind me because one of my friends has this picture that I've admired for the 10, 12 years that I've known her. And I'm really close to finding something that's almost identical. So that'll go up. It's just this really beautiful picture of kind of a rocky coastline. And the ocean is so blue and the picture is so crisp. You can see all of the jagged edges in the rocks. So that will go up. But minimalist is very much how I like to go about things.
Hmm.
I I think I went through that more approach in corporate, and it didn't make me happy. And I'm very fortunate to say that I have everything that I could possibly want. But one thing that I didn't quite answer
Hmm.
was how I go about refining that speech. I think one thing worth pointing out is if
Hmm.
you look at the way the really successful creators or the people that have a following or we might have seen, if you look at the way they present themselves to the world, there will be things about them that you like and things about them that you don't like.
Yeah.
So if you choose Dan Coe, I think in his earlier videos, he was great, whereas now he's got this ominous, um, droning sound, and his content is still great, but
Mhm.
his delivery, the way he presents himself, is just kind of the dark, the grungy, the gray voice, color themes, everything.
Mm.
I like his content, but I don't like that version that he's putting out now, which he's really leaned into. And then you have Justin Welsh,
Mhm.
who's just chat, 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 and he presents really well. He's a fast speaker.
Mhm.
But then we look at Hormozy. It might be my perspective, but he's almost dismissive in his content now. Like, it's not that hard. What are you doing? Just do this. And I think that works really well with his client base. And it's probably how he is and how he has to operate in business.
Mm.
But then you have some creators, and this is why I like Chris Do, the future. Not
Mm.
only is his content unbelievably effective, and he gives away so much, it's not even funny. So every day, almost every day, in the sauna, I will put the iPad out the front, I'll have one of his videos on, and
Yeah.
every time there's just value bombs.
Mm.
And the way he articulates himself, he's very well spoken.
Mm.
He emphasizes the right areas, and when he speaks, you feel like you're kind of in the room with him,
Mhm.
and it's in a way that it's not smothering with regards to, oh, please pay attention to me. But you
Mhm.
know what it's like when you have a conversation with people, and this is very much a feeling that you give out, is when you have a conversation with certain people,
Mhm.
you feel like you are the only person in the world at that point, because they are giving you all of that attention, all of
Mm.
that focus. The way I am,
Mhm.
I'm 90, maybe we'll say 85% of the way to that the majority of the time. Because if I'm having a conversation with someone, I want them to feel like I'm genuinely paying attention. Because
Yeah.
most people are just waiting for what they're going to say next, for that person to stop talking so they can say the next thing. And I know that went pretty big picture, but when I watch certain people, I watch the way they speak, I pick up things that they do to articulate themselves that marry up with me, but also mannerisms that aren't authentically myself. And I think
Yeah.
that's ultimately the version that I've ended up with, and it will change. Of course, it all changes over time. But adding on to that, I speak to a lot of salespeople, and a lot more than you would think.
Mhm.
When they started out in remote sales, they were top of the leaderboard.
Mm.
They were doing exceedingly well, and maybe it's 2 years down the track. Maybe a couple of offers have changed. People on those offers are making money. They've gone through a bunch of sales training, but they're not doing as well. They're
Mhm.
not selling, they're not feeling it. And then the thing that I always say to them is, what were you doing then
Mhm.
that you're not doing now? Or what were you not doing then that you are doing now?
Yeah.
And we go through this questioning journey,
Yeah.
and pretty much all of the time, they've forgotten how to authentically connect with someone.
Mm.
They're thinking of all of these talk tracks, all of these questions, and
Yeah.
they have completely suppressed what made them great,
Mm.
and how they connected with people in the
Yeah.
first place.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are so many things that are pulling us away from authentically who we are,
Mm.
and how we need to present to the world. But I think it's really important to not forget that, and at the end of the day, understand that you are just one person communicating with one or many others.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. And so, how do you help them reconnect to that authenticity?
It's a really, really simple exercise. And it's a couple of steps, but it's
Yeah.
really interesting. So say for example, you and I, we're friends.
Hmm.
We hopped onto a call, and you said, "How are you doing?" And I said, yeah, okay. I'm all right. How are you?" What would you say?
Yeah. It sounds like there's something going on. Are you okay?
Yeah, yeah, uh, work's not great. The boss is being a bit of a prick at the moment, and things at home with Marley, they're not the best, but well, that's how it is. What about you? What's going on?
Oh man, I mean, yeah, nothing too extraordinary. But it sounds like there's a lot going on your end. Like we don't have to talk about it, but I'm all ears if there's something that you want.
Mm. So what you just did then, you did that naturally. Whereas what you'll find is that most sales pros, and that's exactly what I want. Most
Hmm.
sales pros, I have to say a few times, I'm like, hey, we're not on a sales call. We're just
Yeah.
being friends. We're just friends. And then
Hmm.
you have to wait for that over calculation in their mind. And then
Hmm.
we keep following this. Now, just for reference, work is great. Things at home with Marley are perfect.
Yeah.
But we do this exercise because most people forget how to do exactly what you did. I mean, I'm all ears. You want to talk about it? And
Yeah.
then we just play this game of unpacking this fictitious story
Hmm.
of you paying attention to me, making sure that I'm doing okay. And that's why I say we're just friends.
Hmm.
And you'll see on that first layer, every salesperson, when they're in their head, when they're thinking about it, they're like, and they think of all of these sales questions to ask. And then we're going to do another one where you ask me about what I did at work today. And
Hmm.
then I articulate that as being really good. Oh, and then what happened? Which means because
Hmm.
so you're dealing with someone then who is not having the best time in life. How do you connect with them? How do you be there for them? And
Yeah.
then you're connecting with someone who's living their best life. And we just do that little exercise. And what usually happens is after the second, remember, we're just being friends.
Hmm.
You're just checking in on me, seeing if I'm doing okay. You just see this glass shatter with them. They're like, ah, I haven't actually been
Hmm.
talking to this person like a person. I've been in this systematic sales pro where I have to follow my process and I can't skip any steps. And then they lose that human connection.
Yeah.
And then on the back of that, the example I give, and it might not be perfect,
Hmm.
is pretend every sales call you're having a conversation with your best friend who just got back from their first overseas trip.
Hmm.
Maybe they just spent 8 months in Europe and they're telling you, oh my God, I went to this place and did this. What did you do there? And then what? And then they say, oh, I met this guy and he said he's actually going to Mexico in 3 months. And I'm thinking about going, Mexico, what are you going to do there?
Yeah.
What did he say you should do? So then you're jumping between current state and future state and past state,
Hmm.
all in the one journey, but you're actively having a conversation and mapping out what their experience was, what they went through, what they want to do, why they want to do that, who told them they should do that, why did they tell them to do that.
Hmm.
You see, people naturally know how to do this. But when you add in that layer of sales questioning, that's supposed to amplify who you are and what makes you great. But most people, it just suppresses that. And they
Yeah.
get stuck in this loop of being overtrained
Hmm.
and not being able to connect.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And it's disconnect with that natural intelligence as well, of communicating as, yeah, old
Mm,
friends, peer to peer, human to human, and how people genuinely empathize. Like I always uh, learn a lot from my wife. She's just like she's always in that state. I mean, most of the time, in my opinion, she's always like genuinely curious about, hey, like what's going on with you, like is what happened, like how can I support you, and so
mm,
and yeah, it's so simple. um, and I'm curious, how do you integrate that into your current offers? Because I was reading your last newsletter, I think, and you mentioned that you're currently selling a couple of things.
mm.
You're selling like a mastermind for clinical owners, and also like a high level VA service. How does that show up in your sales process? Like, is it just free flow, or do you still have a script or a framework, or how does that show up?
I still have a framework that I have to follow, but at the end of the day, you have to meet the prospect where they are. And some people, you can't assume that every sale is going to be a towards, every sale is going to be an away.
Mhm.
So the majority of the not majority, all of the calls, the beginning, I asked the prospect what stood out to them the most, or what was most relevant, or what prompted them to book the call.
Mhm.
Or if I want it to be a towards sale, I would ask them what success looks like to them. Or if I want it to be an away from sale, I would ask them what the biggest challenge for them is. So at the beginning of the call, I can direct it whichever way I want it to go, and go from there. But it's
Mhm.
just very open. What stood out to you the most? What was most relevant? What in the marketing, what in the videos, what in anything? And then I get my stake in the ground to start the call of where do they see themselves right now? What grabbed their attention? Because there's no point talking about point A, B, C when they don't even know that's relevant. They came to us for X, Y, Z
Mhm.
to help fix this. But then we peel back the layers from that as a start point of what's going on in their world right now. Where do they want to go? Why do they want to get there? How does life change on the back of that? And then how does life change on the back of how life changes? And what
Mhm.
you'll find is the majority of the time, particularly in the mastermind sales, it's about where they want to go, what they want to be able to do, where they sit in the world,
Yeah.
what they do when they're working, what they do when they're not working, and you'll find it's kids, time off, holidays. A lot of it is status as well, how other people see them because they don't want to be the person that's working 70, 80 hours a week. But then the VA service, it's so much fun. That's so much fun because it's replacing one problem that is pretty big in Australia is getting reliable staff
Mhm.
because post COVID, something happened where the Australian government they gave everyone basically the stay at home pay, and because Australia was so locked down, they would pay I think it was $1,200 a week
Wow.
for people to that were out of a job. But what was happening is you might have people that were working half a day a week at a cafe, or
Mhm.
maybe people that were working admin jobs that were earning $600-700 a week. All of a sudden, they could quit their job and get a pay rise for doing nothing.
Yeah.
And then it changed the culture massively. I mean, the Australian work ethic has never been that high. It doesn't have that hustle and grind that particularly the US does.
Mhm.
But post COVID, a lot of these businesses, they're having trouble getting staff that, I mean, A, want to do the work, and
Mhm.
B, they're having to pay obscene amounts. Like we're talking starting rates of $38 to $40 an hour
Mm.
for staff that don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about that sale, it's so much fun, is it's usually the manager and the owner of the business.
Mhm.
I'll ask them about what was most relevant, what stood out, and then I'll get them to take me for a walk through. No names, don't mention any names, but usually there's one staff member or multiple staff members in the past that have done things, conducted themselves in a certain manner that you absolutely don't want replicated.
Mhm.
And it's always, particularly if there's two of them, they'll look at each other and they'll just like Sarah or Tess or whatever it is, and they'll be like, "Wow!" I'm like, "No, no names," and it turns
Yeah.
into this fun conversation. Well, they showed up late, they didn't work, and who takes a reception job if you don't want to answer phones?
Mhm.
And then they're just like amplifying each other, and then they're leveling up this, even though it's in a kind of funny way, they start to feel this frustration of
Mhm.
whoa, that's what I have had to deal with. And then how's it been since then? Well, I've had ads up for weeks. I have 2 to 3 people applying for jobs. Before COVID, it'd be 2 to 300.
Mm.
We've got staff that even if we get them, we train them for 2 months and then they just leave anyway. Through stories and examples and memories, I get them sharing exactly what's going on right now. And
Yeah.
they have then created this anti vision of this is everything that I don't want. And then from there, it's really easy. What do you want in an ideal team member? It's the exact opposite of what they don't want. So if they don't want someone that's unreliable, if they don't want someone that's lazy, if they don't want someone that can't think, they want someone that is reliable. They want
Mhm.
someone that can think for themselves, and they want someone that's prepared to put in the work.
Yeah.
So that the whole sales process is really quickly figured out when you look at it that way. But all of it relies on being able to connect with them, connect with their experiences, and actually get their perspectives on things.
Yeah, no, and then you said something key that stood out to me, which is help them share their stories and their memories and the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis, right? Because when you talk to your neighbor, when you talk to another human, you generally don't look for the pain. I'm gonna
Mm,
consequence you. I'm gonna, do all these fancy things. You generally just want to understand their story, right? Like what's really going on in their world. And that
mm.
comes through, yeah, examples, memories. So that's interesting.
So
Now,
there's another side to that, if you don't mind spending another minute on it. I love this
sure.
sort of stuff. I read a book um, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it was called Pieces of Light. And it
Mm,
talks about how vulnerable the human memory is. And essentially, if you and I had been friends for 10 to 15 years, we went
mhm.
through an experience together, that memory is not the same every time we recount it. And most people, there is such a thing that the memory can be altered or manufactured altogether
Yeah.
based on how the human mind is. And then that's why you have a lot of those people that went to jail for the recovered is it recovered memories theme in, I think it was the 90s, where psychologists were recovering memories of their patients that maybe they had been sexually abused or something like that. And then dads that never did anything, or uncles or whoever it was, were going to jail. And they realized only after 5 or so years that, hey, that's not true at all. The brain is just so vulnerable. People can implant memories in there if they want. And you have, say, we were doing something 15 years ago, it happened to you, and then, as in, like, we were, say, at a theme park and we fell off a slide or something like that, or you fell off the slide 15 years down the track, I might remember that, hey, that was me.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other side of it, I love this sort of stuff, is the memory changes depending on how you feel at the moment. So maybe 2 years ago, you said to me, just like, oh, that beard's pretty thick.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, mate. Whereas 2 years down the track, you and I had a falling out. I'm pissed. And then
Mm-hmm.
I remember that, of like, yeah, he was always making jokes about, like, even my beard. He took an opportunity to
Yeah.
to mock me. Then it's not what happened, but it's how we remember it. So when we ask the prospect to recount stories and memories, we're not
Mm-hmm.
trying to change that story, because all memories, I can't say all because I'm not a scientist,
Mm-hmm.
memories have emotions attached to them.
Mm-hmm.
So when a prospect is with someone else who's not happy about a certain situation, and they are recounting a memory of something that didn't go well, a lot of the time, the emotions that they have that are attached to that memory are probably going to be amplified.
Yeah.
So they're sharing things that didn't go well, things that didn't work. Maybe you were on a trading offer and they were sharing about their losses.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming to you because they need help. They haven't got it right. Maybe they had a few bad trades in a row. When they think about it, because they're recounting where they went wrong,
Yeah.
that emotion might be amplified. There's just so much in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And it's a more elegant way as well to enter into the realm of emotions, right? Rather than
Mm,
just, hey, so how did that make you feel? So what happened exactly? What what's behind that loss last month?
mm,
Like when did it start? How did it unfold? And through them retelling that story, the emotion kind of naturally uh, comes up through a lens of however they're feeling now, right? It
mm,
yeah, it reminds me of so Pieces of Light. I'm gonna check it out. It reminds me of another book. It's called Ficciones, Fictions. It's by an Argentinian writer called Borges, and he basically says something similar. Like, there's no real like absolute memory. We're just creating stories upon stories based on how we see the world right now. And
Mm,
so, even our identities, uh, individually and collectively, like if you think about, like you mentioned, the Australian identity of like the work ethic is not that high. People are a bit lazy. That's just a story at the end of the day as well, right? And so maybe next week or next year you have a different feeling and you start seeing
mm,
different things and you create a different a different perception of the Australian work ethic. Um,
mm,
yeah.
mm.
Anything else to add on that?
One more. So people think that when we replay a memory, we're just playing a film. We just press play. Whereas the theory is that we remember this sliver here, this one, and this one, which might equate to 0.01% of the whole memory. So it might be still frames, or it might be an emotion, or how we felt in that moment, and then we just fill in the rest. So
Mm,
the easiest way for me to explain it is that one, two, three, you have these tiny little fragments that you remember, but then
mhm,
how we fill in the rest completely changes.
mm. Yeah,
Mm,
fascinating stuff. So,
mm,
shifting gears for a moment. So, you're selling those two offers. How and where did you find them?
just networking by my terms, though. So I one thing that I see a lot of sales pros do, and it
Mhm,
used to work really well, is they would connect with other salespeople. Hey, how you doing? Looking for an offer at the moment. Do you have anything? 4 years
mm,
ago, everyone had something. There wasn't many really good salespeople around, and it
mm,
was the high ticket space was absolutely pumping, and the market wasn't used to ads and wasn't used to sales calls.
mhm,
And Facebook and pretty much all Apple devices, your or marketers were able to track what people were doing. The targeting was better.
yeah.
It was a different time.
Mhm,
And I find now that most salespeople are still connecting with other people like it was then, hoping that that other person has something. And it might happen. And you should always network, because it's really good to have access to a good community of people that lift you up and have opportunities.
yeah.
But if you take the high ticket space at the moment, it is this compressor. It's this little bubble where everything seems so big and so grand and so important.
Mhm,
You have all of these coaches that are making a lot of money off people that can't quite make it work. And you have your recruiters, some of them have really good offers, some of them don't. And you've got a lot of people being very contrarian. This is the reason that you're not successful. This is the reason. If you spend another 10K on sales training,
mhm,
you will make money. And ultimately, these people just end up more confused, but a lot of the time. But then if we step out of that for a second and you
mm,
think, all right, this little bubble, the same opportunities are getting passed around. The only new opportunities that come in are the ones pretty much via recruiters, where
mhm,
people or coaches have hit a certain point and they think, I'm sick of trying to hire people off job sites. I'm sick of trying to ask my friends if they know anyone that has sales.
mhm,
Who do I go to? And then they just start Googling commission only sales recruiters.
mhm,
And then the recruiters come in, they get their piece of the pie. And a lot of the time, they will be tasked with scaling these teams as well. And their option, number one, is to set it up like a W-2 role without the benefits.
mhm.
And I get it, it's in their best interest to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas my logic was, hang on, when I was in corporate sales, I didn't wait on other people to bring opportunities to me. I didn't wait on people to fill that pipeline of companies that I wanted to sell for. So why am I in this bubble doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, waiting on job boards, waiting on recruiters? And I
Yeah.
also got really sick of selling to people that were broke. And I get it. Some people talk about the hustle, the grind. You just got to sell more. No,
Mm,
no, I don't believe you should pick a market and aggressively stick to it just because it's what's in front of you.
mhm,
My logic was, how do I find a market that I actually want to sell to? How do I find people that have money? How do I find people that are used to spending money?
Mm.
And then I followed that path. So instead of thinking I sell ecom or I sell fitness,
Mhm.
who do I want to sell to? So then I clearly defined what that avatar looked like. Someone that had money, someone that was used to making decisions, someone that had invested in themselves, someone that was aspiring for much, much bigger things. And then that kind of breaks down a few verticals.
Mhm.
And medical is one of those. These guys have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, gone to university, college for what, 8, 10, 12 years,
Mhm.
and they're making multi six figures a year. They're not going to blink at spending an awful lot of money if it solves their problem.
Mhm.
So I wanted to solve problems for people that had money.
Yeah.
So I forgot everything that we were doing in the bubble and I went out there and started targeting those companies. And obviously, in the course, finding A plus offers, I go through all of the systems that I followed and
Yes.
and how I went about getting them. But that was my logic of I'm not going to keep playing the same game as everyone else in here because it's not working as well as it used to. And it was not working for me.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Just taking a break for a moment and really reflecting, what do you want to sell? Who do you want to sell for? And getting out of the Facebook bubble for sure.
Mm. The question is not who do you want to sell for, is who do you want to sell to?
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
meant. Thanks for
Yeah.
clarifying. Yeah.
Yeah. People with money that have big money problems that are used to spending. That's easily the best avatar to sell to.
Hmm. Interesting. So yeah, shameless plug. Go and check out James' course if you wanna find better and different opportunities.
Yeah.
And yeah, as we wrap it up today, even though I'm really enjoying this conversation, curious to know what's next for you. What are you excited about? Are you gonna carry on with these offers? What's what's around the corner for James?
Mm. It's a good question. That's a good question. So the companies I work with at the moment, they're fantastic. I like working with them and I have no intention of parting ways.
Mhm.
We get along really well, but I'm also realistic in that offers come and offers go and they peak and they trough. And that's just the nature of the industry that we're in. So I
Yeah.
know at any time, should any of those offers dip or alter or anything like that, there are a bunch of other companies that I can go and work with, and I have no plan on leaving the high ticket space anytime soon. There's the possibility of another couple of courses coming out or not coming out, getting put together
Mhm.
because there are some subjects at the moment that I'm really, really enjoying that I think will make a pretty big difference. But I've just got to do my data
Mhm.
collection first and figure out, well, one, is it a big enough problem to solve? And two, will will the market respond to it as I would have when I was in that position?
Mhm.
There's a couple of real world business opportunities coming together at the moment. I won't say anything, I won't say too much about that, but
Yeah.
they're really exciting me at the moment as well.
Nice. Awesome. Well, looking forward to your new creations, your new courses. Who knows? Maybe it's a jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai. You never know what's happening in James's world. And I'm gonna check out the pieces of light. I'm gonna check out Chris though, and he has a cool haircut as well, like we
Yeah,
do.
he does.
Yeah, yeah.
He does.
Awesome, James. Well, anything else you wanna add? Anything I should have asked
Ah,
as we
no,
wrap
nothing
it
for
up?
now. This was fun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. So looking forward to reconnecting and looking forward to your new creations.
Amazing.
All right.
Cheers.
Ciao, ciao.